Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Jasoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Jamunatira Manachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Vishnupai Paramahamsa Parivrajakacarya Shutarashutashi Shrimad Sivangai Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantara Srimad Bhagvatam Ki Gaura Pramanandi All glories to the Summon devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Ajnanantimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhiharevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto Chapter 7, Text 36. Akinchananam hidanam shilonchanam te nehani vartita sadhu satkriya katam vigarhyam nukarom yadhishvara Palrodhasam hrishyati yena durmati. Okay, Jaya, not so bad. Akinchananam hidanam shilochchanam Tene hanivartita sadhu satkriya Katam vigharhyam nukarom yadhishvara Paurodhasam hrishyati yena durmati Akinchananam hidhanam shalochanam Teneha nivartita sadhu satkriya. Katam vigarhyam nukarom yadhishvara. Palrodhasam hrishyati yena durmati. Mothers, Akinchananam hidanam shilom Teneha nivartita sadhu satkriya. Katam vigarhyam nukarom yadhishvara. Paurodhasam hrishyati yena durmati. Akinchananam, of persons who have taken to austerities and penances to become detached from worldly possessions. He, certainly, dhanam, the wealth, shila, the collecting of grains left in the field, unchanam, and the collecting of grains left in the wholesale marketplace. Tena, by that means, iha, here, nivartita, accomplishing, sadhu, of the exalted devotees, satkriya, all the pious activities, katam, how, vigarhyam, reproachable, nu, indeed, karomi, I shall execute, adhishvaraha, O great governors of the planetary systems, paurodhasam, the duty of priesthood, rishyati, is pleased, yena, by which, durmati, one who is less intelligent. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jaya. Translation, O exalted governors of various planets, the true Brahmanas, who has no material possessions, maintains himself by the profession of accepting shilonchana. In other words, he picks up grains left in the field and on the ground in the wholesale marketplace. By this means, householder Brahmanas who actually abide by the principles of austerity and penance maintain themselves and their families, and perform all necessary pious activities. A Brahmana who desires to achieve happiness by gaining wealth through professional priesthood must certainly have a very low mind. How shall I accept such priesthood? Purport. A first-class Brahmana does not accept any rewards from his disciples or yajamanas. Practicing austerities and penances, he instead goes to the agricultural field and collects food grains left by the agriculturalist to be collected by Brahmanas. Similarly, such Brahmanas go to marketplaces where grains are purchased and sold wholesale, and there they collect grains left by the merchants. In this way, such exalted Brahmanas maintain their bodies and families. Such priests never demand anything from their disciples to live in opulence, imitating Kshatriyas or Vaishyas. In other words, a pure Brahmana voluntarily accepts a life of poverty and lives in complete dependence on the mercy of the Lord. Not very many years ago, a Brahmana in Krishnanagara near Navadvip was offered some help from the local zamindar, Braja Krishnachandra. The Brahmana refused to accept the help. He said that since he was very happy in his householder life, taking rice given by his disciples and cooking vegetables of tamarind leaves, there was no question of taking help from the zamindar. The conclusion is that although a Brahmana may receive much opulence from his disciples, he should not utilize the rewards of his priesthood for his personal benefit. He must use them for the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jaya. So this is still Vishwarupa speaking in response to the requests of the demigods. The demigods made a request of him to become their priest. Yesterday we heard that this request of the demigods placed Vishwarupa in a Dharma Sankat. Dharma Sankat means a conflict of religious principles. And then when there's this conflict of religious principles, it's hard to understand which one should be followed, which will not lead to, which one can be followed with the least amount of consequences. Because in a Dharma Sankat, you can see by following either principle, it will lead to certain consequences. Which one will give the least amount of consequence? So this bewilderment is there. Of course, when there is bewilderment, it is hard to make a decision about anything, right? We discussed this yesterday. So here, the first complication he mentioned and his confusion about religious principles is that by accepting the priesthood, a position of, which is like a material position, assisting materialists in the accomplishment of their material desires and getting paid for it and so on, then my Brahmavarcha, that was the word used yesterday, my Brahminical power, my spiritual power will be diminished by such acceptance. So if we accept a position assisting materialistic persons in satisfying their materialistic desires, especially when not giving them any sort of spiritual instruction or benefit in return, then one loses spiritual power, he falls down. So then Vishwarupa had explained this yesterday, this is putting me in a difficulty. Because if I accept such a position, my spiritual power will be diminished. I can fall down from the platform of spiritual life. Right? Remember this? We discussed this yesterday. So then question may come up, but in order for you to maintain your existence, you require some wealth, isn't it? This is the type of argument that most materialistic people will give. Demigods also giving such argument. How will you live without some material, well, without money? Without making money, how will you survive? Isn't it? Most people argue like this. In fact, our mind very much puts up this argument when wanting to join the ashram. How you will live without making money? Isn't it? Parents will give such argument. Friends will give such argument. How you will exist without making any money? How you will survive? Isn't it? Therefore, instead of joining ashram, you go to school so you can learn how to make money. Isn't it? This goes on. Many times this happens. How you live without making money? So in other words, the demigods, says the Acharyas, the demigods are posing a question to remove the Dharma Sankat. In other words, they're trying to say that it is not actually a dilemma. Because making money is not against religious principles. Is it against religion to make money? They make such arguments. Is it against religion to make money? It is not against religious principles to make money. And therefore, there is really no Dharma Sankat for you. That's kind of the implied meaning of the question. There's really no Dharma Sankat because there is no consequence, there is no real dilemma in making money. Making money is not against Dharma. Understand? So then, in response to such a hypothetical question, this verse is coming. So what is this verse is saying? Those who are real brahmanas are called as akinchananam. Kinchana means the enjoyable things of this world. How many enjoyable things in this world, isn't it? Many enjoyable things. Cheesecake, isn't it? Many enjoyable bicycles, cars, of course, objects of sex desire. Many enjoyable things in this world. It's called as kinchana. Kinchana means the enjoyable things of this world. So a devotee, or in this context, Prabhupada said, a real brahmana is called a kinchana, which means one who is not interested in the so-called enjoyable things of this world. Understand? Why is he not interested in the so-called enjoyable things of this world? There are many reasons. Like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Abrahma bhuvana loka punaravartinorjuna mamupetitu konteya punarjamana vidyate. From the topmost planet in the material existence, Brahma Loka, down to the bottommost planet, all are places of misery. All are places of misery. Why all are places of misery? Because you have to die, understand? Any place where you have to die is a miserable place in the realistic perspective of it. So this is one reason why they're not interested in the so-called enjoyable things. Krishna gives an example in the Bhagvatam, in the Uddhava Gita. It is just like a person who is condemned to death, but who gets a last supper before being condemned to death. Understand? They have this system. I think they might still follow it also in capital punishment, where they give you a last dinner before they execute you. Suppose that time they make all your favorite preparations also. Cheesecake is there, pizza is there, lasagna is there, pasta, whatever sense gratification you like. We're satisfying your time. Everything is assembled nicely for you. Big feast is there. Last Supper. Isn't that picture of Jesus Christ also called the Last Supper? Last Supper is there. Suppose they prepare for you. Every bite will be miserable only, isn't it? You can enjoy? Can you enjoy that? Every bite will be miserable. Why? Because as soon as it gets over, you know the next room is the electric chair. And then you'll be finished. So Krishna gives this example in Bhagavatam that the persons in this world of death are like persons who are like this person who is condemned for capital punishment. He tries to get in enjoyable objects, but they cannot actually bring him any enjoyment if he's actually aware of his situation. Right? Now, a person can actually enjoy that Last Supper. Like sometimes I've given this example on college campuses, and someone said, well, why can't he just be in the moment? Just try to enjoy it and just be in that particular moment and be happy. I said, because in the next moment, he knows what's going to happen to him. So similarly, for a person who's actually aware of the conditions of this material world, the condition of death particularly, then he cannot find anything really enjoyable in this world. Just like the person who is condemned to death cannot find his Last Supper very enjoyable. Isn't it? Can you follow? You understand? Just like if you're condemned to death, every bite will be miserable. So a person who's actually aware of the condition of this world cannot really derive any pleasure from the objects of this world. Understand? Krishna gives this example in the Bhagavatam. Therefore, he becomes a kinchana, or he cultivates this quality of a kinchana. Because Prabhupada is using the word here, cultivation. Understand? You understand? Everyone understanding? You understand? You paying attention? And so this is one reason why he does not find any happiness in the material world as such. And therefore he becomes a kinchana. Understand? The real reason why a devotee is called a kinchana, Krishna also says in the Bhagavatam, na parameshtam na mahindra dishnam. What is that? Yeah, na sarva bhoma na rasadipatyam. Na yoga siddhira punar bhavamba. Mai arpito atma ichati ma vinayat. This is Krishna describing an kinchana devotee. You've heard this word many times, a kinchana. This is Krishna speaking about the consciousness of an kinchana. He says, na parameshtam na mahindra dishnam. Na means no. He is not interested in. Parameshtam means the abode of Lord Brahma. He is not interested in the abode of Mahindra, means Indra, a Swargaloka. Now Sarvabhauma, he is not interested in being the emperor on the earth planet. Now Rasa Adipatyam, he is not interested in the sovereignty in the lower planetary systems. Because the lower planetary systems is as opulent as Swargaloka. Not hell, hell is rough, but just above hell are the lower planetary systems. And that is as opulent as Swargaloka. Although there's no sunlight there, the jewels there illuminate the whole planet. And they enjoy great, great sense gratification. Usually for demons, but they enjoy. So he's not interested in that either. Now yoga siddhir, so this is all material. So he's not interested in anything in the material world. That's the idea here. Now yoga siddhir apunar bhavamba. He's not interested in the benefits of the spiritual processes, such as yoga siddhis. This comes up when you follow yoga. Nor is he interested in apunar bhavang, means liberation from the material world. Really? So Kinchana is not interested in anything material. He's not interested in anything transcendental also, as such. And well, yoga siddhis is not transcendental, but even liberation. So what is he interested in? My arpito atma. For those whose atma is totally fixed in me, Krishna says, ichati ma, they desire only me. Mad vinaya, they desire nothing else. This is called the Kinchana devotee, understand? One whose atma is totally fixed on his beloved. Understand? Krishna is beloved. Devotee is a lover. Krishna is the beloved. So his atma is totally fixed on his beloved. Therefore, he does not desire anything else. He cannot even think of anything else. This is called as a Kinchana devotee. Understand? Understand? So for such a Kinchana devotee, doesn't desire anything material. He doesn't really desire anything transcendental that has nothing to do with Krishna. He desires only Krishna. So nothing in this material world can attract his attention. Understand? Therefore, Queen Kunti says that Krishna is the abode only, is the property of those who are Kinchana. Understand? That verse, Jaimaishwaya Shuta Shribir Edamana Madapuman, Na Eva Arati Abidatum Vai Twama Kinchana Gocharam. Krishna can be captured only by those who are a Kinchana. Understand? A Kinchana, who are not intoxicated by aristocratic birth, wealth, beauty, and education, knowledge. Understand? If you're not a Kinchana, then these things will capture your attention and they will intoxicate you. Then you cannot get Krishna. So Krishna says he is only the wealth or property of the materially impoverished. They have no interest in the material world whatsoever. They're only interested in Krishna. Why are they only interested in Krishna? Because they love Krishna. Understand, simple. Love Krishna. Just like, have you ever fallen in love? Fallen is a underscore, but you ever fallen in love? So then when you ever fall in love, and the purport is already given in the statement itself, but when you fall in love, it happens that you don't get interested in any other things also, isn't it? And when you feel separation from the beloved, isn't it? Anyone here have experience of separation from the beloved before? Anyone has experience? Then you cannot eat anything, you cannot sleep properly, isn't it? You lose all interest in the material existence. Of course, sometimes it gets so acute, people commit suicide and so on. That's the mode of ignorance. But the idea here is that you're so interested, you're so absorbed in your beloved, and the experience of separation kills your desire to enjoy this material world. Even in the ordinary material sense, which is really just the transformation of the gunas, but it's a good way to understand the situation. Similarly, the devotee is only interested in his beloved Krishna, and when he does not see Krishna, when he feels separated from Krishna, this whole material world becomes null and void. What is that verse from Sri Shashtakam? Yugayitam nimeshena chakshusha shavi. What is that? I forget. I haven't chanted this in a while. Huh? Yanidam jagat sarvam. Yes. This whole material world feels, what is that? Null and void. Shunyayitam jagat. I feel zero. Understand? I see nothing. Why? Because that verse is an expression. That's the 7th verse of the Shishashakam. Is an expression of the devotee's feelings of separation from Krishna. So when one feels separated from his beloved, then this whole material world becomes shunyayitam, becomes zero, null and void. Nothing in this world can satisfy without the beloved. You also have that experience, many of you, isn't it? Not in the transcendental sense, in the material sense, isn't it? You have experience? You have, yes. You have. Yeah, many have this. Only D-Raj doesn't have. Everyone else in this room is having this experience. Yugayitam jagat sarvam, but in the material sense, or at least repeated birth and death. This verse is Lord Chaitanya expressing his feeling of separation, so the whole jagat feels like zero. Such a devotee called the kinchana. Nothing in this world can satisfy him. When only his beloved can satisfy him. If he's separated from his beloved, then he can find no happiness. Understand? So what is the wealth of such an Kinchana devotee? Aside from Krishna, fine. He does not require any material wealth. How he maintains his existence? How does he use dhanam? So this word dhanam is used, means wealth. How does a Kinchana maintain his existence then? Because he still has material body. He has to eat, has to sleep, these things. How does he maintain? So it means that it says here, dhanam, the wealth of such a brahmana, and a Kinchana devotee, is Shila Uchanam. This is a way of maintaining livelihood for brahmanas. Yesterday we heard of the 6 means that brahmanas maintain their livelihood. They teach and they study the Vedas. They perform deity worship and they teach others how to perform deity worship. And they accept charity and they distribute charity. Understand? These are the 6 means that were discussed yesterday. These are means of livelihood for brahmanas. Aside from these means, there are other means of livelihood for the brahmanas, of which 2 of them are mentioned in this verse. These are considered the 2 highest means for which a brahmana a renounced brahmana here, may maintain his existence. Shila Uchanam. Shila means refers to those who are Vaishyas, agriculturalists. They leave some grain in the field, and the brahmanas will go and collect that leftover grain in the field. Uchanam refers to Vaishyas who are selling grain, bartering grain in the marketplace, and in that some grain is left over in the marketplace. The brahmana will go and take that grain, and this way he will maintain his existence. Very simple. And not only himself, but it says his family also. Can you imagine maintaining your family like that also? Age of Kali Yuga, it would be rough. You go to a marketplace and just get some leftover grain, and that way you maintain yourself and your family. This first-class brahmana is like this. He is a Kinchana. Just like Kulavechra Sridhar. How Kulavechra Sridhar was surviving. He was selling banana leaves he was selling. For 10 paisa. I don't even know how much that converts, so I always say it's probably like less than a penny. And of that 10 paisa, he would give 50% to the worship of Mother Ganga as a devotee. So he was really poor. He was so poor that his clothes had holes in them, and he would patch those holes up with other patches, and those patches had holes. Understand? That's how poor he was. In his thatched house, there would be so many holes that when it would rain, water would just come inside. And he wouldn't try to do anything to fix it. He was just chanting Hare Krishna. And whatever little bit he was able to maintain himself, he was maintaining himself off of that only. So when Lord Chaitanya doing Mahaprakash Leela, Lord Chaitanya was giving benedictions to all his devotees. So that time he wanted to glorify Sridhar, Kulavechra Sridhar. So because the other devotees weren't so much aware of his greatness, and the materialists also they weren't aware of Kulavechra Sridhar's greatness either. Kulavechra Sridhar during the nighttime he will be screaming in ecstasy of Krishna Bhakti, Hare Krishna, throughout the night like this, screaming. Radha, Sham, like this, screaming throughout the night. He was screaming. And all the materialists who lived near to him, they said he is screaming because of hunger pains. Because he is so hungry, he is screaming like this. And he's making big disturbance for us. We should get him out of here. They would think like that about Sridhar. They didn't know his greatness. And many devotees also didn't know the glory of Sridhar. So this Mahaprakash Leela was performed by Lord Chaitanya, where he sat in the seat of Lord Vishnu and said, I am the Supreme Lord. It's true. It is true. And he was giving benedictions to all his devotees. So to glorify Sridhar, he called Sridhar. Everyone was wondering, who is this Sridhar? So Lord Chaitanya began speaking very openly, as if with 5 mouths, the glories of Kulavechra Sridhar. And when after speaking his glories, he asked for Kulavechra Sridhar to take some benediction. He's so poor, take some benediction, at least that you can get a thatched house with a proper roof at least. Something you take, some material. So, what is the Kinshana devotee desire? My Arpita, I already just mentioned, my Arpita Atma, Ichchati Ma Vinaya. He doesn't desire anything but Krishna. So when he asked Kulavechra Sridhar, what is it that you desire? So you know what Kulavechra Sridhar asked for? Anyone you know? Chaitanya Bhagavatam. What did Kulavechra Sridhar ask for? Lord Chaitanya, when he was younger, he would come by and accost Kulavechra Sridhar. He would bother him all the time. And then Kulavechra Sridhar was selling banana leaves, 10 paisa, like I said, it's less than a penny. So Lord Chaitanya would say, I want a discount. Now 10 paisa, less than a penny. How you can't get more discount than that? This is how I'm maintaining myself also. Lord Chaitanya said, this is too expensive, I want a discount. You are cheating Brahmana. You're not giving me a fair deal. And this way he would constantly, daily accost Kulavechra Sridhar. Like this. And then sometimes Lord Chaitanya didn't even want to pay that. Kulavechra Sridhar would say, I cannot give any deal, so Lord Chaitanya would just take it and run off. And this way, daily he was accosting Kulavechra Sridhar. So when Lord Chaitanya during his Mahaprakash Leela asked for Kulavechra Sridhar to take some benediction, Kulavechra Sridhar said, I would like the benediction that golden boy will come down the road forever and accost me. That's the only benediction I require. In other words, as I already described about the Kinshana, he only desires to have darshan of his beloved, to get an opportunity to exchange and interact with his beloved. He has no other desire. So then Lord Chaitanya said, no, take some other desire. Some wealth is there, at least some proper clothes you should take and so on. No, only this desire I have, that golden boy who will come down the path of the Ganga and bother me, that he shall continue to do that forever, in all eternity. And then everyone started chanting the glories of Kulavechra Sridhar. Understand? Anyway, I didn't mean to talk about that. That came up spontaneously. The idea here is that Shilochanam, that such a detached Brahmana maintains himself with very little. Such a renounced Brahmana, who maintains himself and his household life with very little. It says here the second line, Te neha nivartita sadhu sat kriya. Means that kriya, sat kriya means activities. The activities which leads to the attainment of sat, eternal existence. The sadhu will not do more than this to maintain himself. He will perform all those activities that are meant to attain spiritual life, sat kriya, translated here as pious activities. Just by this shilochanam, or this very little bit to maintain his body and soul together, he will accept that, and with that little bit, he will maintain all his activities for attaining the spiritual world, sat kriya. Understand? There's a nice regulative principle in devotional service, one of the important ones. There are 64 regulative principles. 20 of them are considered important, the first 20 and the last 5. Of those first 20, one of them is Lord Chaitanya says, Yavan nivaha pratigraha. One of them is to accept that which is necessary, only that which is necessary to keep body and soul together. Understand? This regulative principle. One should not accept more than is required, or less than is required to maintain his bhakti. That's what Rupa Goswami says. You should not accept more than is required or less than is required to maintain your devotion to Krishna. Understand this how, so in terms of facility and opulence, a devotee will accept only that amount which is required for maintaining his devotion to Krishna. And he will not accept more than that. If he accepts more than that, then he runs the risk of material attachment, again, awakening strongly in his heart. If he accepts less than that, then due to scarcity, he cannot maintain his bhajan. If you don't eat enough prasad, just like sometimes you want to be really renounced, you don't eat enough prasadam, then due to the scarcity of intake and due to the lack of transcendence and consciousness, then you feel so weak that you cannot maintain bhajan, you cannot chant, you cannot do anything. Like sometimes you do Nirjala Kadashi comes once a year. Sometimes you get fired out, I'll do Nirjala Kadashi. It's actually a good thing. One should try it out. But then if it comes to the point where the whole day you're just meditating on food, and you cannot stand in the kirtan also, you cannot stand to do any service. That is ordinary consciousness also, but but literally stand. You cannot stand anymore and so on. Then that means you have taken too less for the maintenance of your bhakti. And similarly, if you take too much, you eat too much prasadam, then after that 3-hour nap. No. A pre-nap, a nap, and then a post-nap, and then Greg was joking like this yesterday with Manoj. A pre-nap, he said there's a pre-nap, and then there's the nap, and then there's the post-nap, and he said that'll get me ready for rest. Anyway, so if you take too much, intake of prasadam is there, then you mode of ignorance is increased, you cannot do anything also. So you have to accept just enough for maintaining your bhakti. Kamasya nindriya pritir labo jiveta yavata jivasa tattva jignasa nartasya shcheya karmibi. Srimad Bhagvatam says, human form of life is not meant for connecting the senses to the sense objects, indriya priti. Mostly the orbit of the mind is like this only. How the senses can connect to the sense objects, isn't it? You're thinking how the tongue can connect to nice foodstuffs, how the ear can connect to nice sounds. Hare Krishna every day. We need a little bit of Mariah Carey or something like that, or whatever it is we used to listen to before we came to Krishna consciousness. Yeah, the mind is thinking like this. The ear is like, what is this? Hare Krishna all the time. When I moved into the temple, I remember I had a CD booklet. It was like a big CD book. I had Lauryn Hill in there and some classical and different things. So I was like, there's no way in hell I can hear Hare Krishna every single day without fail. I need some other sound vibrations to keep me inspired in Krishna consciousness. The mind is such nonsense, it thinks in this way. This is called Indriya Priti. This means the desire for, Indriya Priti means love of the senses. Desire to connect the senses to their sense objects, understand? The nose wants to smell nice things, the eyes want to see beautiful forms. And this way our whole, the mental orbit is like this only, all the time thinking this way. Bhagavatam says this is not the goal of life. Nindriya Priti Labha. The goal, Labha, is not this. That is not the goal. What is the goal? Jiveta Yavata, you should do whatever it is necessary to keep body and soul together. You should not do more than that. If you do more than that, then there's risk of increase of material attachment and being brought out of Krishna consciousness. If you do less than that, then there's risk of scarcity and inability to perform bhajan. So, jiveta yavata, whatever is necessary to keep body and soul together, to maintain your bhakti, you accept that. And the rest of the time, jivasya tattva jignasa, the rest of the time should be used into inquiry about tattva. There's so many tattvas. Tattvas means spiritual truth. Understand? Bhakti tattva, Nam tattva, Guru tattva. Understand? Shakti tattva, Avatar tattva. So many tattvas are there to understand in Krishna consciousness. Our time should be used for inquiring about those things in Krishna consciousness. Nartasya karmibihi. Nothing else should be the goal of one's activity. Bhagavatam says the same thing is mentioning here. So one should accept just enough that is required to maintain one's body and soul together. For here, the renounced Brahmana is mentioned. He's a Kinchanana. He lives very austere life, accepting only a little bit of food granted. He can do so with his state of consciousness and psychophysical nature. He cannot do more than that. And Prabhupada says even at his time, there were persons who were like that. The last lines of this verse says here, Katam vigarhyam nukaromya dishara, parodasam hirshati yena durmati. He says, persons who want to accept the priesthood, this is for the persons who derive joy from this are durmati. Hirshati yena durmati. Hirshati means joy. The persons who will find this position joyful, accepting the position of a priesthood in order to help people facilitate their material desires. Only those who are durmati. Mati means intelligence, or sometimes refers to consciousness. Durmati means faulty. Dur means bad or fault. This is a persons of faulty intelligence, they will derive joy from this position. Not persons who are actually brahmanas, they're actually dedicated to Brahman, dedicated to Krishna. And so in this way, Vishwarupa is replying to the request of the demigods, saying that this is the position you're putting me in. They're saying, well, what is the fault? He said, only persons who are durmati will not see any fault in this. Only those who have faulty intelligence will not see any fault in this. Prabhupada says the conclusion is that although a brahmana may receive much opulence from his disciples, he should not utilize the rewards of his priesthood for his personal benefit. He must use them for the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada says this is the conclusion. The idea here is that a devotee, of course, can use anything for the services of Krishna. And that's the conclusion Prabhupada is saying. In other words, the conclusion is not that you have to practice Shilochana, nor I don't think any of you are ready to do that also. Anyone here is prepared to do Shilochana? Anyone here? No more prasadam downstairs. We'll go to the marketplace, find some grains left over in the marketplace. I'm sure Divine Street, they would have Indian store. You go, Sadhu, please give me whatever leftover grain. You ready to do? Anyone here ready to do? No one is ready to do. So the conclusion is not that you have to practice Shilochanam, but the principle of accepting only that which is necessary for the maintenance of one's body and soul, and as a broader principle of one's bhakti, as described by Sri Rupa Goswami, is an absolute necessity. And in order to do that, especially in the age of Kali, there may be many things one may accept for that maintenance of devotion to Krishna. Just like devotees, community, we do accept many things. Cars, for example, for traveling Sankirtan, for example, is there. Computers may be there for communications. Cellular phones, right? Smartphones, absolutely necessary, right? iPads, absolutely necessary. What are some other absolutely necessary things that we need in Krishna consciousness? Wi-Fi. Can't live without Wi-Fi, and these are absolute necessary things, right? So then for those things which are absolutely necessary for maintaining your bhakti, you can accept that for Krishna's service. Otherwise, if it's not absolutely necessary and you do accept it, it leads to the destruction of your spiritual power. That's what Vishwarupa is saying. If it is not actually necessary and you do accept that, then there will be destruction of your spiritual power will go down. Means your ability to follow anything will start to diminish. Then you'll be taken out of Krishna consciousness. But if it is necessary and you accept it, then your bhakti will increase. It will increase your consciousness at least. Anyway, this is principles mentioned here. Anyone wants to ask anything? Okay. Monk.
Hare Krishna. Sorry. Remember, Ananta Gopal Prabhu told me in Croatia the temple was so poor that they would have to do that Silochanam. They would go and beg vegetables from the vendors. To be like, we have nothing to cook, so to go and beg vegetables. Anyways, my question was that in devotional service we understand that by performing bhakti yoga, then we're cleaning our conditioned nature. Now, oftentimes what happens is, especially in Kali Yuga, is somebody with like a Shudra nature may have to perform like a Kshatriya function or a Brahminical function even. And I've heard that the problem in that situation is that, for example, the real Brahmana, when he teaches, he's not expecting remuneration. He's not expecting to make money off his teachings. Or when the real Kshatriya administers, he's not trying to lord himself over the living entities. When the Shudra performs those functions, he's teaching, now he's expecting a reward. Kind of like here, we're discussing this point. Or when he becomes a Kshatriya, then he's, instead of like protecting the people, he becomes like the controller of the people. So my question is, as a sadhaka, sometimes you might have to do things that are quote unquote in a Kshatriya position or in a Brahminical position, like teach Krishna consciousness with others or manage some event. But because I know I have a Shudra nature, the tendency creeps in to either take advantage of the situation or to lord yourself over other living entities. But we understand that because we're chanting Hare Krishna, we're getting purified of that lower nature. But until that has happened, how do we, as aspiring devotees, perform functions of a higher nature while we still have a lower nature?
Well, question number one would be, why are we accepting the function of a higher nature if we don't have such a nature? That would be my first question. Why do we accept that service or activity if we don't have the nature for it? We don't have the qualification for it. And then what might be the answer to that question? Yeah, sure.
Something that would just happen naturally. I'll share, I'm like, for example, I'm reading with certain individuals and explaining Krishna consciousness. I've heard about it from you and others, and it wasn't like, I planned it out, or it was just very natural. Like, we became friends with someone, and then they were like, we want to read, and so then we got into this position. But obviously, I'm not as qualified to teach as you or some of the other senior devotees are. So
Oh,
that's what I'm thinking.
with that type of example, that is not a real big deal because, as Rupa Goswami explains in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, whatever faults that are there in the stage of practice for a sadhaka, those faults will be diminished in the course of his practice of sadhana. Simple example is this: when you start chanting Hare Krishna, generally there's so many offenses that one's commit. The conclusion is not that now I should stop chanting and wait till I get rid of my offensive nature and then take up chanting again. Some people do think like that. I've met several people who thought like that in the beginning of my Christian consciousness. The conclusion is that, okay, I chant offensively, continue chanting until chanting removes the anartha which is causing several offenses. So in other words, bhakti is itself the purifying agent. So and the same message comes in many places. When there's a fault in the execution of one's service, generally in Vedic culture there was a system of atonement, prayashchitta. But Rupa Goswami teaches, the Bhagavatam is teaching in the sixth canto, we've already heard, that there is no need for prayashchitta on the account of devotee, that the process of bhakti itself will correct and bring the devotee to the proper position. Using the example that you gave of like speaking about Krishna consciousness to others or services in related to Krishna consciousness, organizing Ratha Yatras, those are not ordinary like varnashram activities. Those are devotional activities as they're angas of bhakti even. So by the execution of anga, just like we hear in the Ishopanishad, the Supreme Lord is antiseptic and prophylactic, right? Describing the Supreme Lord. So then antiseptic means that it can purify without itself becoming contaminated. So by organizing festivals, by chanting the glories of Krishna to others, etc., those are angas of bhakti and they're antiseptic. So even though there is some contamination in our execution, we want people to reciprocate with us when we speak. We want them to glorify our discussions and so on. That will go on. But aside from that, one should carry on with the antiseptic medicine until the anartha is disappeared. I remember my own personal experience with Sachinanda Maharaj. This is my first experience. I was at the Ratha Yatra. I've shared this with many devotees. I was at the Ratha Yatra. This is my first year as a devotee. And the New York Ratha Yatra. And after the Ratha Yatra, the next day they have like a mosh pit kirtan. And it's ecstatic. Oh, very dangerous also, by the way. Many people get hurt. But it's super ecstatic, like mosh pit, literally mosh pit. And before that, I was not dancing so much in the kirtans because I was a trained dancer. So I didn't want people to glorify me because I'll be busting out all my moves, this, that, and everyone will say, wow, you're amazing. And then I'll, thanks. And kind of get into it. So then I used to not dance because I didn't want to be glorified and my false ego would be puffed up and, I would get puffed up and so on. So I would not dance, but this kirtan was so ecstatic, this mosh pit kirtan, that you couldn't resist. You just got sucked into it. And then when I got into it, when I get really into it, as I start pushing people out of the way, move, I'm about to bust it out, And then I started doing that. And I would do it playfully, like I'll with my hips like bump them all the way out of the circle, move and start spinning, leaping, jumping. I was like really dancing very heavily. And then after I finished my little mini performance, in the middle of the kirtan, Sachinanda Maharaj came up to me. I didn't see it. Some devotee came up to me and embraced me from behind, like really strongly, just like grabbed me like this and just like held me and then said, "Thank you so much." So I turned around to see who it was. It was Sachinanda Maharaj. I was like, "Wow, mercy." And I offered my obeisances, and then in the kirtan, which was dangerous, but I just did a little quickie, and then after the kirtan, I went upstairs and took bath. And when I was getting out, after I got out of the bath and got dressed, I was about to go back downstairs because they were having a play or something, I think Ramayana or something like that. And as I was going back downstairs, Chandramali Swami was going to his room with Sachinanda Maharaj because they were roommates at that time. And so I offered my obeisance. Chandramali Maharaj introduced Sachinanda Maharaj to me. And he said, this is Jaya Jagannath, he's a dancer. So Maharaj started glorifying my dancing, very beautiful. And he was like very sweet. And then I said, Maharaj, actually, I don't like to dance in the kirtan because, I'm a trained dancer. When I dance, devotees glorify me, I get puffed up. So I was kind of like avoiding it, but I couldn't avoid it today because it was just like I was sucked in. But normally I like to avoid it and because of false ego. And Maharaj told me that time, he said, even if it is false ego, it doesn't matter. He said, because your dancing is bringing pleasure to devotees. So because of that principle, it will purify you. Even if you get puffed up, that is a material thing that is temporary, and Krishna will correct it in due course. You just have to stick to the principle of, dancing. Whether you're doing it for false ego, but it's bringing pleasure to the devotees, and through the devotees bringing pleasure to Krishna, so Krishna will correct it. And that way, bhakti is self-correcting. One need not. It's not that we should not be aware of those sorts of, shortcomings in our consciousness when we're executing them. But what is the medicine in getting over those shortcomings? It's not just to meditate upon them. I'm disqualified in this way and that. Well, one can be aware of it, but then finally the medicine is the same. Chant Hare Krishna, continue speaking the glories. And Krishna will help you out through those devotional services. Krishna will help you out, help you to bring you, as they say, water always finds its proper level. Is that the saying? Something like that. So similarly, Krishna will help you to find the proper level through those purifying agents. And to be honest with you, in the age of Kali, the sort of varnashram considerations are really, I don't want to say inconsequential, but you gave the examples of like a brahmana, he would just teach without expecting any remuneration. But in that age where varnashram was established, people would actually give charity to the brahmanas. So you didn't have to expect anything because people knew that it was their dharma to give to the brahmanas. Now a brahmana has to maintain himself, and there are different types of brahmanas. They may not be able to maintain themselves by salochana, depending on the circumstances. So you're going on teaching, performing your rabbinical duties, let's say religiously, but no one else is performing their religious duty to give charity. Then the brahmana becomes in a position. So then he has to start charging for something, for example. Or the kshatriya. The kshatriya, he does his service of administration without lording over people. But people in the age of Kali, Shudras or less, mostly less than Shudras, they're so opposed to authority that unless an authority kind of like puts his foot down on a lot of things, then nothing happens. You don't have a cooperative society that understands what is the position of a leader. Generally, because of the bad leadership that we see historically in the age of Kali and even now, people don't respect any authorities. So then usually if an authority just tries to, give guidance and so on, no one's following, everyone's doing whatever they want, whatever they feel is right, whatever they think. So then what is he supposed to do? Then finally he has to do something that appears like lording it over, get out, or follow what I say, or get out. And from one perspective, it looks like he's just lording it over. But from another perspective, it's because people don't actually have respect for his position as a leader. So in the age of Kali, to try to speak in those strict varnashram terms is not really possible, at least in most places, because people are not yet, they're not yet appreciating the things that are required for such a structure to be successful, like the faith in brahmanas. First of all, where are the brahmanas, where are the kshatriyas, and then if they are there, the faith in brahmanas and kshatriyas that's required to make the system work, and so on. So in those sorts of examples, it gets into an unlimitedly nuanced sort of discussion. But as far as the devotional principle is concerned, if you're doing bhakti, it's antiseptic, and it is not that we sit there and meditate on our faults and shortcomings. We should be aware of them as such, but anyway, the medicine. I remember when I would sleep, let's say have lusty dreams or lusty thoughts coming to the mind. That can be very discouraging. Has that happened to anyone of you every now and then? Occasionally it happens. You get like a lusty thought, and sometimes you think you're doing really good in your Krishna consciousness. Like you had like a really good week of japa, and book distribution was going really good. And you're like, man, I'm kind of like getting pure up in here. Sometimes it happens. Because the mind is crazy. It's a crazy fellow. So the mind will say, you kind of getting pure, And then all of a sudden you have a dream or some like real heavy, lusty thought comes to mind. It's very discouraging. It's very because you thought you were like really making progress, you were moving ahead, and all of a sudden, boom! and you're like, oh my God, and you're like bewitched for 4 days, you can't get something out of your mind, and you get a little bit discouraged. When that would used to happen, of course it happened to me all the time. It happens now even. I would just get up next day and chant. It wouldn't even be like I wouldn't even take it so seriously. Just like I remember one devotee asked Kadamba Kadamba Maharaj that, Maharaj, I have sex desire. What should I do about it? And Kadamba Maharaj said nothing. Which I thought was a really clever answer. Maharaj, I have sex desire. What should I do about it? Maharaj said nothing. Go on chanting Hare Krishna. Otherwise, why make a big deal out of these anarthas? Rather you make a big deal out of bhajan, and the bhajan will bring everything to the proper level. And that way you stay, and stay encouraged. Bhakti Luke wants to say something. Okay, Bhakti Luke. Okay, he's giving it to you, Jagannath.
You make a question, why the person accept the service if they don't have that nature? But sometimes the authority asks one to do, and there is the need. So what to do in this situation?
Yeah, this is what you call an emergency situation. And it seems like our ISKCON movement is perpetually in a state of emergency. And so therefore people who don't have certain qualifications, certain natures are always asked to do things that they're not qualified for, don't have natures for. And the consequence of staying in a state of emergency is that a lot of problems come up. People fall down, faith is disturbed of the society, and so on. Obviously, the reason one would accept such a service without having the nature and qualifications is because we hear the importance of accepting the direction of an authority. And because of having faith in that principle, it's a principle that the authority is asking me to do something, and oftentimes it is coupled with the idea that with the instruction comes the empowerment to carry it out. I don't know how many times we heard that one. And so, the faith and the principle of authority coupled with that sort of understanding, it is easy for us to, okay, even though I don't have the qualification, Krishna is merciful, he can empower me, the authority is giving me the instruction, with the instruction comes the empowerment. And so people accept it, they accept certain services. And you said, and the need is there also, it's kind of like a state of emergency. But then one has to be a little honest with himself when doing such services, if it is becoming the case that whatever, he's not able to focus on certain important aspects of his development, in Krishna consciousness, he might have to reevaluate and, rediscuss his involvement with a particular service. Like, for example, management service is a very tough service. It's a service that's required also for an institution of our size. But then if you take up such services and then you find that you're losing time for Krishna consciousness, really. Of course, the service is self-Krishna conscious, undoubtedly. But then your chanting is, heart is coming to nil, basically. You're just trying to get them in. You're not able to read the books even. You're not able to just have a Krishna conscious exchange anymore. Most of your time is just spent in discussing, problems of your temple or your institution, the anarthas of individuals and so on. And you have no time for even participating in the kirtan of the devotees anymore. And that way, you find that your conscience is actually being dragging down. Then you might have to reevaluate your involvement. Maybe I need help. Maybe I shouldn't be the lone manager. Maybe I need at least 4 other persons to also share the services. Like in Chowpatty, they have 5 temple presidents. And when you go to Chowpatty, you don't even know who's the temple president. You don't know which one is because they all just look like brahmacharis, they're all brahmacharis. And there's 5 of them, and they switch off like every 2.5 months or something like that. They switch the services so that it won't be overwhelming. And that way you might have to rediscuss a way that you can accept such a service which you may not exactly be qualified for yet and don't have the nature for also, adjust some parameters to make it as successful as possible. Anyway, the point is that everyone has to be attentive to their own Krishna consciousness. It's not going to happen that we're going to grow just by saying, well, follow the authority, and with the instruction comes the empowerment to carry it out. And you see that the empowerment isn't coming, and you're going down, 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 down. You have to really be kind of a little attentive to your Krishna consciousness and then maybe rediscuss some things. Now, I know in the recent times I've been personally doing that, having some discussions, ongoing discussion. Like, I need some adjustment in my application of Krishna consciousness. I've done it like this for 10 years now, and now I need a little adjustment. There's no fault in that. Otherwise, if you're just doing something in a state of emergency, and then things decrease. that will be bad for you as an individual, and it can be really bad for the community also, depending on the type of position you have within the community. It can be really problematic. So one has to be attentive to those things. Krishna consciousness is not a mechanical thing. Okay, I just follow this and this is going to come out. There has to be consciousness behind the application, cognition, and then adjustment needs to be made accordingly. That's my practical, let's say, understanding, at least in the recent days. You want to say something?
Hare Krishna. I was hoping you could help me understand and appreciate the spirit behind statements like, this is the age of Kali, so Varnashram is not really apparent, like it's very difficult.
Not scientifically organized.
Yeah, like Brahmanas, it's practically impossible for them to follow their prescribed duties in a sustainable way. Because I've always had the impression that as aspiring Vaishnavas, it's part of our responsibility to try to organize, especially our society, but eventually the whole society, in terms of these principles of Varnashram Dharma. Is that true, or what's your?
I think it's an ongoing discussion because there are various opinions on both sides of the issues. So I think it's an ongoing discussion. Definitely there should be organization. Like the word that I usually use is like concessional. It's not exactly varnashram in the strictest sense because the environments are not usually conducive. Just like, for example, for householders and the types of prescribed duties they would accept in the age of Kali, it is not at all varnashram. and the types of engagements that they have to do now, where they're working 8 to 12 hours a day, they hardly have any time for anything like study. Say so supposedly like Brahminical grihastas, for example. Everything is just sucked up by trying to survive. Mode of ignorance is survival mode. In that way, you see, there's great complications in following all the, let's say, proper principles of such a culture. So I usually like to use the word concessional. It means that varnashram, in terms of the varnas and the ashrams, they're there within material nature. Krishna said that in Bhagavad Gita. But it's not scientifically organized practically anywhere in the world at present because of the age of Kali. So without the scientific organization of these psychologies that arise in material nature naturally, without the scientific organization, it's very hard to generate a proper community, a proper social community. And therefore, the way we're trying to survive within our institution is by the principle of bhakti primarily. Because bhakti doesn't require the support of varnashram necessarily. And Rupa Goswami spoke about that profusely in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu we're studying. So we try to organize our society on the principle of devotion to Krishna. Okay, the deity is there. Okay, you have this job, it's taking up a lot of time, but at least dedicate some time to serving the deity, dedicate some monetary contribution to the deity, and that way make some connection to the deity. And as far as varnashram is concerned, okay, you can follow this and that principle. And so it's not really the full thing, somewhat of a concessional thing. But with the principle of Krishna being the center of it all, there's still complete hope because your spiritual life can still flourish, just provided you stay connected to Krishna. So my spirit, of course, is not to put down Krishna's system. That is Krishna's system. Like I said, it's not scientifically organized. And therefore, although these mentalities do appear in nature naturally, without the scientific organization, it's hard for us to generate that type of community. We just don't see it practically anywhere. If we're coming close to it anywhere, it's in Mayapur. If we're coming closer, but practically everywhere else in the world, maybe Hungary, and then what else? Everywhere else in the world, it's just like survival consciousness.
I just remember the section you read yesterday in the Nectar of Devotion, that little verse that until one has completely given up attraction, he's lost his taste for material life, he must follow
and develop faith.
And develop faith in Varnashram Dharma. So perhaps if we're saying it's concessional, we don't have to follow perfectly the varnashram system. We can kind of make it with our bhakti principle. To me, it seems a little bit like lack of faith in statements like that. That it is required.
Well, that particular statement, actually, the key thing there is actually faith. Because faith is that which gives qualification for bhakti. Although Krishna is, and Rupa Goswami, because he's discussing a lot of statements of the Bhagavatam there. And the main thing is the faith. If there isn't pure devotional faith, then faith in bhakti, faith in Krishna. So when there isn't pure devotional shraddha, then varnashram is required. But if there is the awakening of pure devotional shraddha, then varnashram is not a necessity. That doesn't mean that one will not take principles for the support of their bhakti, Vaidhi bhakti in this context, because of their psychophysical attachment. But it means that it is not a necessity if people can really surrender to the processes of bhakti. Generally, because people can't surrender to the processes of bhakti fully because of psychophysical attachments, okay, then accept principles from Krishna's system of social organization to support the application of your Vaidhi bhakti. And that's generally the way that we follow, and I think in ISKCON. Even when Prabhupada speaks about a varnashram community, you don't really think varnashram, you think like farm community. That's not varnashram. But it's like simple living based on community, and it seems to me that that's maybe what Prabhupada meant by varnashram. Not that like the full-blown system, because I mean it requires so many things.
Well,
that
yeah,
it's
but
not attainable.
it seems that varnashram is the most efficient social system.
It is, if scientifically organized.
For the purpose of inculcating and developing and nourishing that faith that you mentioned, which is the requirement for devotional.
No, that's what Rupa
practice.
Goswami is actually preaching against when he makes a statement that varnashram is not an anga of bhakti. His idea there is that only bhakti leads to more bhakti, and varnashram is not an anga bhakti. In other words, that varnashram will not lead to an increase of bhakti. Only bhakti leads to the increase of bhakti. The only reason that varnashram will be accepted, Rupa Goswami says in the next verse after making this statement, is because there is psychophysical attachment. And in order to deal with that psychophysical attachment in the most healthy way, then accepting the principles of varnashram, that keeps your psychophysical situation healthy and peaceful. And then you apply bhakti, that bhakti will advance you in bhakti further. So that's how he speaks about it there in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu.
For, like we hear about varnashram and then daiva varnashram.
Yeah.
And in such a daiva varnashram society run by brahmanas, where the whole idea is to facilitate the yajna of the brahmanas and have the various members of the community participating in some way, directly or indirectly, even the person who's growing the foodstuffs that are going to be used in the offering, the yajna of the brahmanas. How is that not bhakti?
Well, when you want to qualify it by Daivi Varnashram, Daivi Varnashram basically means Krishna consciousness. And a Krishna conscious society centered around the services of Krishna. Obviously, when Rupa Goswami is using the word Varnashram, must not be meaning in that sense. But still, the point still remains is that ours is not a Varnashram society. After 40, 50 years of ISKCON, we still don't have one. We have concessional principles. Brahmachari ashram, I always say, where's our brahmachari ashrams? We are not brahmacharis. How many people here were smoking dope and doing sex before they joined the ashram? And then now wearing saffron. We're not renunciates, we're not brahmacharis. To call us a brahmachari ashram is concessional. We're serious about education and Krishna consciousness and making advancement. But where's the guru to guide us in the ashram? Their guru will be there. And the whole purpose of brahmachari ashram is basically service to guru. When you see Narada Muni speaks about it in chapter 7th canto, it's all about service to the guru. This like intense service to the guru. You don't eat until the guru eats. You don't do anything until the guru eats. You don't even read the literatures without first offering obeisances to the guru. And then after you offer obeisances, you read. And then when you finish reading, you go back and offer obeisances to the guru. The whole idea is kind of centered around this dedication to the guru of the ashram. We don't have that. So when we speak about varnashram in our discussion, we really have to qualify it. And because, like many things in Krishna consciousness, you say statements, you just get a very romantic idea of what it is. But you have to really qualify it in terms of the context. And the context is our present age of Kali, our present institution, which doesn't really have all these principles set up. Maybe we will get them. I mean, I'm not.
No, sorry, I don't yet fully understand or appreciate statements like that that are saying like it because it's the age of Kali, therefore it can't be done, or this thing, that thing. But my, like Prabhupada, he
I
wasn't.
didn't say it can be done. I said, let me see where it is being done. And you show me a community where it's actually being done successfully. That was my actual
Yeah,
statement.
so back to my original question, isn't it our responsibility as an aspiring Krishna conscious society? Doesn't Krishna conscious society mean a Varnashram society? Otherwise, how can it be called a society if it's not
Yeah.
based on Krishna's social system?
It can be based on the principle of Shravan and Kirtan, which is also
Then it's just anarchy.
You can say like that. Anarchy is the position of Brahmanas, and Vaishnavas are above Brahmanas. That is a fact.
Yeah, okay,
Brahmana,
fine.
that's a fact, but we're
fine.
not Brahmanas, so therefore you speak of the necessity of a social system, undoubtedly. And that's why I said we're trying to apply principles of the Varnashram to establish some level of social system. But it's not the Varnashram as we would normally think of it. It's a concessional understanding. That's what I'm.
At the moment,
At the moment, and perhaps in the future will come. I don't personally have faith that it's going to happen. And that doesn't mean that it can't happen, and we haven't seen it happen yet. And I'm totally open to such a society. That would be great. But until then, you're working with the actual reality.
Yeah, okay.
There's a difference between our ideals and the actual reality. And the further the gap between our ideals and reality, the more we suffer. So we have to realize that this is our high ideal for a Krishna conscious society. But this is what the reality that we're dealing with right now. And how you say?
Bring the two together.
Yeah, bring the two together, decrease the gap between the two. It's going to be tough. And there are members of our institution who are certainly dedicating their energy to decreasing that gap.
Yeah.
Is it the responsibility of everyone within the institution? I don't say it is. Our primary responsibility will be try to cultivate Krishna consciousness.
Yeah.
And then the leaders of the movement who are dealing with such areas, they're trying their best. Perhaps they will be successful. I don't want to say that they won't be. I don't personally have faith it's going to happen anytime soon in my lifetime. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see how Krishna wants to manifest things. It'll be up to Krishna if such a society manifests itself. I'm going to end there because we're a little bit beyond time here. Thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. I think the Boga is here, so don't run away. And I'm going to help out with the Boga.